So I think we can wait like 5 more minutes to more people to connect.
Then that works fine with me.
Okay.
I'm here, and whatever you think is best.
Okay, thank you.
I see Alejandro is with us. Alejandro, welcome. Good to see another face. Oh,
Thank
my
you.
pleasure.
I'm looking forward to listen to you.
Well, I'm looking forward.
Very interesting subject.
It's as someone who's taught as long as I have, it's a very, it's something that's always an issue and something that you have to think about all the time. But I'm looking forward to hearing about what you guys do as well. That's why I like doing this, to find out what others are up to.
Wonderful, wonderful.
Yeah, Natalia, I was just dealing with, I just had calls with a couple of the students from the class. One of them appears to be doing a project using Tableau in one of his other classes. And then one of the students works with a not-for-profit organization, and they want to do some Tableau stuff. So it's been great to hear back from them and to be able to continue to work with them.
Oh, that's really good. I think that that's a good thing from online courses, because students feel that they already have like the link with the professor.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because when it's face to face, after the professor leaves, like they don't continue like the conversation, or they just cut the contact, I think.
Absolutely. Hey there, everybody who's showing up. Thank you so much for being here today. And I guess Mauricio is going to kick things off. Is that right, Natalia?
Yes, we are waiting for Mauricio Ruiz. So, hello everyone, and thank you for attending this webinar delivered by Professor Del Fodness. So Professor Del Fodness is an associate professor at of marketing at the University of Dallas. He received his PhD in marketing from Florida State University, and his current research focuses on marketing and sustainability, particularly in issues related to strategic thinking and innovation. His work has been published in a number of leading journals, just as the Journals of Service Marketing and the Journal of Travel Research. His current consulting focuses primarily on strategy, research, and training and development across a variety of industries. And right now, Professor Del Fodness will deliver a webinar about self-grading and peer review in business school. So, Professor Fodness, I give the floor to you.
Thank you very much, Natalia. And let me ask the most important question you can ever ask in an online setting. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Yes, we hear you.
Yes, you can never
Yes,
ask that
Professor.
question. You can never ask that question often enough, in my experience. I have given some of the most brilliant lectures of my career to no one except myself and an empty microphone. So thank you very much. I am really delighted to be here today. So thank you all for this opportunity to meet. Thank you, Natalia, for all that you did for me with Summer University and for organizing and putting this together as well. Again, my name is Dale, and I'm a marketing prof at the University of Dallas, and I want to discuss with you, and I'm going to focus on that word discuss because I'm not here to lecture. I want to hear and learn from you as well. But I want to discuss what I do with self-grading and peer review for experiential learning in my business school courses that I teach. And I know that our time is, I'm beginning to hear, does someone have another, something open? You have to mute because I'm getting background. Okay, thank you very much. All right, so I know that our time is going to be brief, and so I just want to say that if anybody wants to follow up afterwards, if you have any questions, or if there are some resources that you would like that I refer to as we go through, please feel free to contact me at my home university address here at the University of Dallas. So just a little bit, I like to know about the people that I'm talking to, and I just want to say a little bit about myself. I do live in Dallas, Texas, kind of this epicenter these days of the virus here, the pandemic in the United States. And I have been rarely out of my house since March. In March, I was in Finland teaching a class at a university there. And I managed to escape from one of the least infected parts of the world to one of the most infected parts of the world. So pretty proud of that, but staying safe here. I think that Dallas is probably best known for the multiple professional sports teams that we have. I share my home with a couple of dogs who will no doubt make their presence known in our discussion here a little bit later on. I also wanted to point out that I teach, my home university is the University of Dallas, which is a small Catholic private school here in near Dallas, Texas. And I am also teach and I've taught there for about 15 years. I also teach at Aalto University in Finland, which I see Uniandes is a partner with. And I've taught there for over 25 years, actually. And there I teach primarily tourism classes because that was the industry from which I originally came. And so Florida, Alaska, San Antonio, Finland, a number of other countries and areas I've worked in the travel, tourism, and marketing industry. But I'm not a hospitality person, I'm a marketing person. And because I think of my knowledge of the area of particularly customer satisfaction and service quality, there was at a point in my career I was picked up by Microsoft, and I have done a lot of work for Microsoft and been a consultant to them for a very long time in their services side. And I started out basically by teaching engineers how to be nice to people, how to be nice to customers, and why they should be that way. And I've done a great deal of training and development work for them, as well as some statistical work as well going forward. So that's sort of the unstructured view of who I am. Just a little bit about, in a more structured look, I'm a person who is an avid mind mapper, and so I try to keep it down to a dull roar, because not everybody is. But this is sort of my teaching, research, and service, the big three that we're all responsible for as faculty. So you can see that my interests are pretty broad. Marketing is probably, I've been doing it for a long time, so I'd have to say it's a little boring to me at this point, and that's why I branched out, particularly into sustainability. And teaching analytics is really kind of marketing to me, because it takes me back to my roots with statistics. I enjoy doing innovation, and then most recently I've started teaching courses in data visualization. As a former market researcher, that's very natural for me. And I'm lucky enough to be able to teach at all different levels of the spectrum, from our students who are brand new to the university and to college, through to our doctoral students, and I do a lot of executive education and corporate training as well. And I've also been lucky enough to be able to do that a great many places, thanks to other schools like Uniandes, who are willing to welcome me in, and to Microsoft, who has had me at most of their subsidiaries around the world at one time or another. And again, for us, a service means our consulting as well as the things that we do for the university. And I do my service in services industries, businesses, related to travel, tourism, and hospitality, and also in technology. I do a variety of different things. And, I'm old now, so my career has sort of started off as a market researcher, and now I'm more of a strategy consultant. My research has always been asking questions about why customers do the things they do. And that's probably because why I've developed a real interest in complexity and looking at things beneath the surface. So I'd like to hear just a little bit about you. I see that we have 25 people now, which is really remarkable. So you probably know each other, but it would help me if I knew what areas you came from and what you were up to. So I'd appreciate it if you'd indulge me a little bit and just go ahead and unmute and just tell me your name and what area you teach in, and that would be awesome. And I also want to say right here that you're more than welcome to stop me and ask me questions at any time. I think you can raise hands one way or another, or you can just stop me, whatever it takes to get me stopped, because it's kind of hard to get me stopped once I get started. But why don't we go ahead and what I would do if you were students, I would make you, and I'm sorry, I say make, I would ask you to type your name on the screen. I don't know if you have access to be able to do that. I'd ask you to type your name on your screen and then go ahead and unmute and introduce yourselves with your name and what it is that you teach. We don't really have that, so we'll just have to figure it out as we go ahead. So let's scramble for it, and please go ahead and let me know who you are.
My name is Markus Thiel. I'm teaching operations, logistics, supply chain management.
Great, thank you, Marcus.
Hello, I'm Tatiana Rodriguez, and I am a member of the organizations area teaching OB and leadership.
Thank you, Tatiana.
I am Carlos Hernandez. I teach business history. I'm an economist. I do research on transportation and on business history.
Fascinating. Thank you very much, Carlos. I've only known one other business historian in my life.
I'm Roberto Gutierrez. I wrote on the tool that is quite interesting. And I'm a professor that better considers himself as a student on hire. So I'm not bothered by you calling us students. I appreciate that. And I try to study issues of social entrepreneurship.
Thank you, Roberto.
Okay, let me introduce myself. I am Juan Carlos Montes. I also teach strategy and environmental analysis. And I heard your presentation when you were as a teacher during the summer school. So pleased to see you again.
Well, thank you for coming back. I appreciate that.
Well, my name is Paula. I teach human resource management and OB. And I belong to the organizations area, and I'm glad to be here. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Paula.
Hello, my name is Marco Azuero. I'm also from the organizations area. I teach negotiation and team building.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Marco.
My name is Jaime Ruiz. I work also in organizations area, and I am associate professor, and my subject is arts and cultural management. And I'm very pleased to be here. Thank you very much.
Hey, thank you very much. Appreciate you being here.
Hi, I am Luis Diaz. I'm a professor of management, and I teach fundamentals of management and family business strategy.
Thank you, Luis.
Hello, my name is Miguel Martinez, and I am a teacher of public management, strategy, and fundamentals of management, and my research is in incentive in organizations.
Awesome. Thank you very much for being here.
Hello, my name is Catalina. Thank you, Dale, for the presentation. I'm in the marketing area, and I'm teaching principles of marketing and consumer behavior.
Another marketer. Welcome, Catalina. Glad to have you with us.
The first one here, and I see the other one is going to talk right now.
All right.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. My name is Andres Barrios. I'm a professor at the marketing area as well as Catalina. I also do some research in the service domain, and I'm glad to hear you.
And thank you for being here. I appreciate it. A couple more. I do very much appreciate it. Great to know what is interesting to you.
Okay. Hi, Dale. My name is Mauricio Ruiz. I'm Associate Professor of Information Technology and Analytics. I apologize for not being able to introduce you today, but my internet connection was down, so I had problems to connect. Okay, thank you.
I totally understand, Mauricio, and thank you so much. You got to introduce me once before, as I recall in my class, so I appreciate it, and I appreciate you being back. So thank you very much.
Hi, Dale. My name is Vincent Sarvanti, and I teach entrepreneurship and management consulting.
Okay. I just barely heard that. Thank you very, very much.
Hi, my name is David Eschnark. I'm part of the organizations area, and I teach organizational theory and change.
Thank you, David. Excellent. Glad to have you with us. Anyone else want to say hi to us before we get started here? I think one of the challenges I've always had as a professor is I want to kind of move on, just keep going, you know how people tend to be in the States. And one of the things I constantly struggle with is to provide enough white space or empty space for other things to happen. So I don't want to rush people along, but I also want to respect people's time. So any other takers for someone who'd like to introduce themselves and let me know what you do? And hearing none. What would I like to have happen in this time together? I'd like to talk more about using self-grading peer review for experiential learning. And I'd like to learn more about it myself and learn from other people as well, what's going on and talking about it. I do use these things, and oftentimes when I say I use self-grading, people give me sort of an askance view and say, well, so you don't work, you don't do your job. I kind of want to talk about that and see what you think about self-grading. But at a higher level, I want to talk about experiential learning. I think it's required of a lot of us these days. I want to talk about why I do it and what it is that I do to use it in my classes. And then I want to talk about some of the tools that I use and why I use those tools as well. So the short answer to why is it that I use experiential learning in my classes is because I'm required to. I am not only required to incorporate it into my course design, I have to include it on my syllabus. So all of our syllabi at the University of Dallas have this statement that you see here. We're committed to providing experiential learning opportunities in our classroom, most effective means, and then we have to document how we use experiential learning. The school decided to do this because they decided that they would take experiential learning very, very seriously. And the only way they could figure out to make sure that all faculty were on board was have a way to monitor it. And the way that they decided to do that was by putting it in our syllabi and then reviewing our syllabi each term to see what it is that we're doing in terms of experiential learning. So what is it that you're doing? I mean, it says this course incorporates experiential learning in the following ways. And I'll show you what I do in just a sec, but I kind of like to hear what is it that you do in terms of experiential learning. You know, there are the basics, and I'd like to hear those, but I'd like to see if there's anything new out there. You can feel free to type in the chat. You can unmute and say something. You can type something on the screen. I think we have multiple modalities here, so please go ahead. Catalina? I saw you show up. I think I'm hearing hands, but I can't see them all here. So if I'm missing you, if you're raising your hand, just go ahead and unmute so that we don't miss anything good. So what's something you do? How do you incorporate experiential learning?
Something that I do, but I don't know if it's really experiential learning, is that they have to make a proposal in principles of marketing. They have to make a proposal to a real company, so they act as doing like consultancy for the company. The companies that I use are usually small companies, restaurants or coffee shop that are close to the university, and they act, the students are acting as consultants. I don't know if that's experiential learning.
I really like that answer because you said along with it, I don't know if this is experiential learning. And I think that's really important. A lot of people are told at schools, what I find is that a lot of schools require that their faculty use experiential learning, but they don't really tell them what that is. So they kind of have to figure it out on their own. And so that's kind of one of the things I'd like to talk about. So in my opinion, what you've just described there is definitely experiential learning. It's the type of experiential learning that I do in my courses as well, getting the students out there mixed up with the big wide world of work and people in the workplace. And so, yes, I would agree that a team project like that. Diagnosing the strategy of an organization. I teach courses in corporate social responsibility and sustainability. So a very popular project that I do in my classes is having students go in and do sustainability audits. We work with a company that does them professionally around the world, And so they partner with us. They teach our students kind of the basics of doing sustainability audits, and then those students go out and work with companies to do sustainability audits. And I would consider that to be diagnosing strategy. A real market research project. I used to teach the market research class, and it was totally a project class. I didn't even have time to teach the students how to do market research. I threw them right into the project and then sort of helped them do it as they went along. So it was quite an interesting experience for all of us there, I would say, but definitely. So we're getting kind of a common theme here is that we're mixing it up with the real world, that we're hands-on, that the students are actually doing something. What else? And I think I think that when we think about what's experiential learning, real experience is probably where we kind of start, and too many times it's maybe where we stop. What might be some other things other than student projects? All right, so my answer to this question on my syllabus is down here, and I'm going to go through and clear off drawings. I'm going to go through here and see what I have. So yes, I do have projects, as you were talking about there a little bit ago. They have term projects, and this is for one of my undergraduate classes, and in this one, they don't do sustainability audits. They look at sustainability issues within 3 companies and do compare and contrast. So that's a term project. It's about outside businesses. It doesn't necessarily interact with them, but it's a team project. So a project can be experiential if it's external or if it's internal, just with teams as well. And then, of course, the other big one, and at our school, what people first said when they were asked to do experiential learning is they said, well, I do case studies. Does that count? Well, for us, yes, that does count. We see that as a way of looking at the larger experience of what is done. And so I've used those things as others did, but I really felt that there needed to be something else. And I started teaching classes in critical thinking. And so when I got more familiar with critical thinking, I really realized that that was an incredibly valuable skill set that students need to have. And so my interest in experiential learning really turned in the direction of reflection. So reflection is an important element of critical thinking, and it's a key element of experiential learning. And so I use reflection in a variety of ways in my classes, and that's primarily what I'm going to talk about here. But that's the issue, is that I'm expected to do experiential learning. I do the things that other people do in terms of cases and projects, but I also like to use reflection. And so a couple of definitions that I have here, and I mean, there's lots and lots of them, depending on which you want to look at. And I always think about it about what is it and what am I trying to do with it. So for me, experiential learning is really about developing critical thinking skills through reflection on doing, learning through doing. Because I want students to be analytical, I want them to be creative problem solvers and effective decision makers. And so then reflection is an important part of that. And so again, this is my definition of it, my working definition of it, helping them to understand what it is that they're learning by actively engaging them with the assessment and doing their own self-evaluation. So in other words, I ask them to partner with me in terms of evaluating their performance. And those of you who are involved with AACSB, you know that one of the buzzwords that's popular with AACSB these days is lifelong learning. And reflection is a key element of lifelong learning as well. So for my school, I'm able to talk about how I follow the AACSB requirements or advice to use lifelong learning by talking about how I use reflection in my classes. So I'd like to ask, what is it that you do? I mean, how many of you, can you raise your hands? Is there a raise your hands? There's a yes or a no. Let's see a yes if you use reflection in your classes. I'd just be interested. So on the chat, I believe it is, or not in the chat, but in the participants list, you can do a yes, a no, something like that. So how many people use reflection in their classes? And again, reflection is sort of like the first one, what is it? And we'll kind of work towards that. All right, let's hear. Catalina, what do you do for reflection in your class?
After they have to do some work with a team, and after they submit the work, they have to write a paragraph about the experience and about how much they participate in the project and how much they learn. That's
all right. And do they submit that to you, or do they submit it to the rest of the team?
only to me. And
only to you.
Yes.
Okay. Anyone else? Does anybody use journaling? Does any, I mean, a very popular
Kind of.
form. Okay. Paula.
Well, in my classes in human resources, I usually use small cases to talk about dilemmas when we make decisions about talent. And so basically they have to work in groups and discuss what are the dilemmas, the ethical dilemmas in the case, and not only find a solution, but rather to discuss how each of the members approach to this dilemma, and then come to a conclusion. And then they will present to the course in different moments, not in the same class, but each group will present to the other ones the case, the dilemma, how they discuss what were the approach, if they agree on the solution, or rather there was not agreement between the members, and they will present that, and also they will give me a short reflection as a group, written reflection.
All right. Thank you. Thank you. Who else? Who else has an example of using reflection in their classes?
I use it in my negotiation classes.
Marco.
Not at all the exercises, but in some exercises I suggest to do reflection about how what they learned in that negotiation, and what was new for them in that negotiation.
What was new for them? What they learned about themselves. I like that. Anyone else? Anyone else have a reflection activity that they use?
Yes, for two of my activities, they first submit a draft, and then in class I give them like a teaching, like a grading guide, and then they have to grade each other based on my grading guide, and then they have to go back to their homes, fix it according to what their classmates told them to do or recommended them to do, and then they hand the definite version for me to grade.
That's excellent. You'll see that I do a very similar thing when I talk about my reflective activities. You use the term grading guide. I'll use the term rubric, which we tend to use here. And some people say checklist too, but it's the same idea basically, is that they have some script. They have some structure to what type of feedback they give to one another. Good. Anything else? These are great.
I wanted to say something about reflection. I use two types of reflections. One's about the content of the material, to reflect on what the strategy that they adopted for a simulation, for example, did it help or not? And that reflection about what they did in the simulation is one part, but I also ask them to reflect about the process. How did they get there? Did their teamwork work or not, etc. But I raised my hand before because I wanted to ask about your approach. You say that learning by doing was like kind of the basic. And I started thinking, okay, we can think about doing as people are listening. They're doing something. They're listening to me, and I can talk about, I can talk for 90 minutes and the class is over, and They were doing something, they were listening. But I think that reflection is the key point for changing some doing, like hearing, into something that's more active. So I think that and my question to you is, where do you draw the limits of doing? Because there's some doing that I would say it's active. It helps a participant to become active and a participant to learn. It transformed that participant in an active learning. But if you don't do like a definition of doing, then one has to resort to the reflection in order to change that doing into some active participation and learning.
I really love that, because you have given me the perfect segue into what I want to talk about next, which is how do I do it? And I agree with you completely. There has to be a target. There has to be a trigger. I believe that, you know, it's easy for us to say, okay, talk this over in your group. How did things go? What do you think? I think that reflection has, for it to be useful, has to be targeted. I think there is a time and a place for sort of broader reflection, and maybe in a doctoral program, I would do broader reflection because students already have frameworks that they bring into it. But when I use it when the undergraduate and master's programs, I have a very specific type of reflection that I'm looking for that is tied to a specific type of activity, and for different purposes, for different learning objectives. So here are the three that I use. I use a reflection in terms of self-grading. And you'll see for all of these that, to me, it's a structured process. So it's a structured process for students to give them the opportunity to evaluate, first of all, for self-grading, evaluate the quality of their own work. And I give them the explicit criteria, and I want them to do better work in the future, which is why I liked what Carlos said. One of the key elements of self-grading that I talked about is it doesn't do any good to have them do self-grading if they can't apply what they have learned from their reflection on their self-grading. That's the big component of it to me. Another thing that I do then is in peer review, and I think that was more of what we heard from, was it Paula a little bit earlier on, where the students share with one another maybe the outcomes that they were able to accomplish, and maybe it was about their process. But with peer review, once again, I believe that students, when they share their work with other students, they need to be able to use the feedback that they're getting to be able to revise and improve their work. And then the third part, the peer evaluation. Peer evaluation maybe is more about Paula was talking about. This is where students are providing feedback to one another. I know we have a lot of OB people in the class, so you're very familiar with this, is that we want to assess and improve the quality of collaboration by being able to look at your strengths and weaknesses in terms of group collaborative efforts, and to be able to build on those. So when I use reflection, I use it for a specific purpose, for a specific outcome that I'm looking forward to, and then I have specific tools. And that's kind of what I want to talk about in this next section. And again, I'm sorry I missed your hand, Roberto. I guess I don't quite understand all of the notices that my machine is giving me. I don't often use Zoom. I use other things, but I will pay more attention, and if not, just get my attention some other way. So let me talk about self-grading first, if I could. So again, I want students to evaluate the quality of their own work based on evidence and explicit criteria, and the purpose is I want them to do better work in the future, which is kind of the purpose of grading, right? What are some of the other things? What are some of the things that you think of when you hear the term self-grading? Does anybody do self-grading? First of all, I rarely find other people who do self-grading, so I would be delighted to find people who do. I'd love to hear about it. Self-grading is much more common in other types of disciplines. It's very common, for example, in nursing and in healthcare professions. I see it in engineering from time to time. Does anybody do self-grading? Do any of you, I guess I could say this pretty extremely, do any of you allow your students to grade themselves? Or
I had a chance last Saturday to do it on my first session with the MBA students. They were going to build their teams for all the course. So I did a first time rubric to evaluate, to do that self-evaluation about how did they do the building of the team in terms of 4 or 5 criteria that I chose early. That
okay,
was
and so what was the process that you used? How did they report back to you their evaluation?
It was the first time, so the only thing that I did was to they filled the rubric with their gradings about all these 5 criteria.
Okay, and then they submitted that into you.
Yes.
Okay.
It was my first time doing that on this course.
All right, and I see that we have a message that someone has done it before, but not lately. I guess, was it a bad experience or does it take too much time? Want to say anything about that?
I was the one. I was the one that put that because what I discovered was that they had an assessment, let's say from 1 to 5, and they graded themselves on the right hand adequately, I would say. Let's say the distribution of grades was just moved to the right, closer to the 5 than I would have used it, but it was kind of accurate. So when I used it, I try to figure out, okay, well, this gives me some pointers, but it's not what I would assign. So I just dropped it, I guess like 4 or 5 years ago.
All right, thank you for that. I think that is an experience that I've had as well. So let me talk about it. And again, as I've said before, I use all of these things for very specific purposes. And what I'm going to do is, I apologize for all of the words, but this is what I show my students. And I'm happy to share any of my write-ups, how things look on syllabi, handouts that I have. I have videos that I produced for the students to explain these things to them. I have scripts and PowerPoint decks for those videos, but I use self-grading for the purpose of assessing contribution to learning, because one of the big challenges for me is that I teach around the world, and I teach with a lot of different cultures who have a very different attitude and approach to in-class participation. I love teaching in Latin America, in South and Central America, and whether it's teaching in the classroom or teaching with executive education, there is so much interaction and so much contribution. It's remarkable. It's an incredible experience for me. I also teach places like Finland, and I don't know if any of you have ever been to Finland, but everything that they say about Nordic people is true. I can say that because my family was Norwegian, is that they tend to be a bit quiet. They tend not to want to contribute. There's a lot of reasons, a lot of cultural reasons why they remain quiet in a course even when they're being asked to contribute to the experience. So I've long worked on how to be able to assess what I call contribution to learning. For a long time, I did like everybody and I counted attendance. Well, attendance is important, but if you're there, you got to do something, and you got to do something that's going to move the conversation and the learning in the class forward. And so I've spent a lot of time in making it clear to students that this course is interactive. Everyone shares responsibility for presenting and discussing materials. It can't just be me. You don't want to hear me talk all the time. We need everybody's voice in the class for us to be successful, because I believe that we learn best when we learn together. So contribution to learning is attendance, which is participation plus contribution. You're not only there, but you're contributing to the class discussion. So I self-grade CTL after every class session. I used to do it maybe 2 or 3 times a term, but thanks to technology, I can do it after every class session. Once I realized that I didn't have to be the one who did it, that I could give that responsibility to the students. And so what students do is I've created a rubric, and that rubric was based on studies that I did with my students when I asked them what they thought constituted good contribution in a class. You know, what do they think that they should expect of one another to learn from one another? And I collected that data for a number of years. And as I said, I'd use it and I'd maybe put it on their midterm exam and on their final exam, so I'd have them self-assess twice. And I was always surprised to see that they assess themselves much harder than I would have. So then I finally figured out, well, I can do this every time. And that means that the students will see the rubric by which their contribution and participation is being graded on. They will see it every day or every week of the class. And so I have a self-grading quiz that I create based on my rubric. It has 5 criteria, and I'll show you in just a moment here. It takes the students about 5 minutes to do it. It's the only way they get credit for attendance or being in the course. Even if you were there, even if I saw you, if you don't fill this out, you don't get credit for the class. So I think that's another thing, is that if you're going to give people, if you're going to use reflection, if you're going to use experiential learning, it needs to be meaningful. And it needs to be meaningful in terms of the grade, because we all work to incentives, right? So I always struggle to make sure that they are properly incentivized. So you can see, you can all read, there are some of the basics there. I think one of the most important is to make them understand that in no way am I giving up my responsibility for grading. Grading is still my job, and I do the grading. You are invited to give input into your grading. I'll take that into consideration. You're not, quote unquote, grading yourself. You are providing an assessment that I will use as part of my job in terms of grading you on this. So again, I do go through, as I've talked about down here, I audit their self-grading. I change grades where someone has clearly not done what they said that they did. I will change them to 0. I use this in both online and on-ground classes. It works great. I always use it. I always use the tool online, but it doesn't matter if it's a synchronous class, an asynchronous class, or a classroom class. I always do it online because that makes it possible for this to all happen. So the students grade their own contribution to learning for each class session. After that class session, they immediately see what their score was that they gave themselves, and they know exactly what they need to be able to do to change it. And one of the things I've learned about experiential learning and reflection is that you really need to go the extra mile and tell students why you're doing it. I think that's part of reflection. They need to understand, why are you doing it? So I talk about the research. These are slides. These are actual slides that I use in my class. Research says that we learn best by experiential learning. We talk about that. We talk about how we've learned. We talk about reflection, what reflection is, and then I want to draw them into it. I want them to understand that if they develop their skills in reflection, they're going to help you not only get a better grade on this part of your grade, which usually is 15 to 20% of their total course grade, but it's a lifelong skill that they'll be able to use at work, in their and in their personal lives as well. So I give them the purpose, and I tell them this is what I'm expecting. These are the assumptions. I expect you to be honest, and I will trust you, but I will verify through the audits. I expect you to understand and look at the rubric, because, you know, I spent years and years writing rubrics that nobody ever looked at except me. And so they are required to look at the rubric frequently by using this. And I expect them to do that. I expect them to ask any questions if they don't understand. And they can see how their grade changes based on their responses. And so, again, I also expect that they will want to improve, that they will want to do the best they can. And then I like this quote from John Dewey, kind of gets back to maybe a little bit of what we were talking about earlier, is that it's not that so much that we learn from experience. We learn from reflecting on our experiences. So here is the rubric that I've created. This is not totally mine. I've adapted it from some work I found from some people at the University of Minnesota Hospital Systems, and this is what they were using to teach their nurses. And so I've adopted this for my use in the business school. So this is my contribution to learning rubric as it's set up in a self-grading quiz. This is not the exact one that I used in my class at Uniandes for summer school, but it's very, very similar. I adapt it to the situation that I'm in. As you can see, this is an eye chart, so we're not going to go through this, but there are 5 major categories: attendance, and then I have participation and contribution, and I have that in the open class session, which is when I'm talking and everybody's there. And because I do small group activities in every single class, I also give them the opportunity then to assess themselves in those small group activities going forward. So that's kind of what the big picture of it looks like. And so here's attendance. And again, these are, I changed this a little bit depending on some classes. I know that I changed it for Uniandes a little bit, but it's kind of this basic idea is that what exactly is expected? How late is late? Sometimes it has to be what the school says it is, because the school has a policy that they want in place. Here is participation and contribution. Participation, were you there? Did we hear from you? You know what? You could be active and you get more points. You can be passive, you still get points, but you don't get as many. So it's your choice. And so along the side, this is a problem that you guys would have with Sikua, with Blackboard. Blackboard doesn't let you do these nice little decimals on your points in your quizzes. So I had to make it round everything up to a whole number when I worked there. But there's participation and then there's contribution. And so did you talk about what we were talking about? Did you move the discussion forward? Did you contribute to our shared learning experience? And this works in both the online and in the on-ground classes. And it works a little differently for synchronous and asynchronous, but it works. And then it's kind of the same for the small group activities as well. So that's kind of the big points of it. So, what have I learned from doing this? And I'm happy to share all my stuff. I've used it for 5 years now in one way or another, all over. And what I found was that I got what I wanted. I got students to participate more. Sometimes I got a lot more participation than I could handle, which meant that I had to shut up, which, as I've said, is a problem for me, but it's been a great learning experience. I have actually so much more participation in classes now. I say less and I have to plan to be able to say less and to provide space for people to be able to get the scores they want on the contribution to learning by providing them with more space. The quality has been very good because they know that they know what I'm talking about in terms of quality of contribution. It means that I hear and understand that you have looked at the materials before you came to class. And the other thing is it saves me a lot of time. I used to spend hours, and it really was literally 4 hours at the end of an online class here at the university, going through, looking at every threaded discussion and evaluating people on those. Now, when people do it themselves, I can go in, eyeball, look for patterns. If it looks like someone was maybe just always giving themselves full credit, I can go in and check whether or not that was true, but it takes me far less time to understand that contribution to learning. I've also learned that students are harder on themselves than I would have been. Sometimes they give themselves full credit. I can pick that up, and they don't deserve it. And I can generally pick that up pretty easily now. And I'll do an intervention in the middle of a class or something like that and let them know as we're going through that I'm seeing this and what they're talking about and what I'm seeing aren't necessarily the same thing. I generally only have to do that once. They seem to like it according to the course evaluations. I haven't done any formal research, but they have talked about the fact that they like knowing what's expected. They like having the input into this part of their grade. And, there's always issues with sometimes there's technology, sometimes they forget it and all that. And I'm pretty easy with that. And so I will reopen or repost scores for them once these quizzes close. but I generally only have to do that once. They're pretty good about, once they get started and once they figure out, it works pretty well, I would say, with them. So for me, you know, the steps in implementing this is understanding what that group rubric or grading list or grading checklist would be, or what do you called it, again, grading, I called it a rubric. Creating what that rubric is, making it into a digital format to make it easy for the students and easy for you. And then the other thing is explaining it to them, empowering them really to influence their contribution to learning grade. So that's a real whirlwind tour through how I use self-grading. And I'm happy to answer any questions or that you might have. Natalia, are you still there?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm here.
What was our time limit on this? Because I think it changed after we originally talked. What time would you like me to end today?
At 1:30 p.m.
Okay, we've got that. We're good. Thank you.
Yeah, we're good in time. Yeah.
Great. So, what questions do you have? I know that that's a lot to go through. Yes, Paula.
Yes, I just want you, if you could repeat, please, the criteria. So I understand one thing is participation, another thing is contribution. So what is this criteria of bullet points so they can assess their contribution?
Okay, so again, this is what the rubric looks like. I didn't show you pictures of what it looks like when I put it into Blackboard or Canvas or any of the other online learning platforms that I use. But these are quizzes. Each of these is a quiz. So there's one quiz, and the question is attendance. And so how would you rate your attendance for this session? And then these are the options. I arrived earlier on time. I missed less than 30 minutes. I missed more than 30 minutes. I didn't show up. And so each of those, I mean, if you had attendance, if you were there ahead of time and you didn't leave early and you didn't leave during class, you get full credit. For me, I then gave you I usually do 100%, 75%, maybe 50%. So each of these numbers then would be the points that they get. And you could set that up in Blackboard so that people can get different levels of credit depending on what they choose on the quiz. So for this one, someone could have said, well, I was late, you know, I was doing something else, working with the team, so I was late, and so they would have gotten, 75% of the total credits. Well, then that also is, added to what they get for the others, because here's another question. So there are 5 criteria. Each criterion is a question on a quiz, and then these boxes here are the answers, possible answers, and these are the points that they can get. Is that what you were asking? You're muted. You're muted.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
So yeah, no, that was what I was asking. Did you, because I'm not sure if you're showing it, I'm not seeing if you're sharing your screen. No.
Can other people see my screen?
No, I haven't seen. So,
but I can see your screen.
I can see it.
Yes,
we can see your screen.
Well, I don't know. Maybe it's
Okay,
because I'm on my phone. Oh, here it is. Yeah. Now
well,
I can see.
I'm happy to share. I'm happy to share my my slides and everything afterwards as well. But I can understand if you weren't seeing the screen, that probably meant absolutely nothing earlier.
Okay. Yeah. Now I can see it. Thank you.
Okay. So you see that. So participation in open class session is really the question: what was my participation in the open class session? Did I initiate contributions? Did I dominate? You know, it can be as bad to do too much as to do little. Did I not initiate, but I responded? So you know what? That's still active. You get half the points for that. If you didn't actively participate, well, tell me you didn't. You know, because there could be a variety of reasons for that. That could be legitimate. You'll still get points for being there, but you recognize that you didn't participate, so you didn't get as many points.
Okay.
So That's how these work. And then all of these little points within the questions, these came from what my students told me they thought was fair to expect of one another. They've been refined through the years, but and I continue to change them all the time. I mean, I continue to kind of evolve. I have everybody in the accounting department at the school in Finland at Aalto is using this now, and they have already completely redone all of the criteria. And I'm looking forward to seeing what they're doing because they're working under slightly different circumstances, but they were able to go through and come up with a version of this rubric that works for, I guess, what they're expecting of their accounting students.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions, other comments?
Yes. One question. You do this quiz. How many sessions during the term?
However many sessions there are. So with Uniandes in summer university, we did it 10 times because we had 10 classes. When I teach my undergraduates here at the University of Dallas, we have 28 sessions, so they do it 28 times. They do it for every session, except when we have exams. I don't do it when there's an exam. I have special versions of it when I have guest speakers. I have other sessions for it when we do peer review sessions.
And you do, you comment on the next session about the results of that?
Nope, it's self-grading. It's reflection. This is their opportunity to reflect.
Oh,
so this is pure
only,
reflection.
okay.
So no, this is me not having to do what you just said. This is me showing students exactly what's expected of them and having to reflect on it frequently. And and they do something. As we were talking about, they do something. They actually click a box that said, I did this or I didn't do that. And they have an immediate result that comes back to them, which is a score that shows up.
Okay.
So this is, I mean, if I was going in and if I was going to assess them by hand myself, it would look like this, but it would take me forever. It would take me forever. I mean, the critical thinking class that I do in Finland, I have 84 students online in that class. There's no way I could ever do this, but they can.
Thank you.
Thank you. And do they complain about it? No, not really. Not as much as I would have thought they would have. I rarely get any pushback on it. Even people who stop doing it and they miss a whole bunch of points because they forget to do it, they still understand. And the question at the bottom, and SGQs, self-grading quizzes, adds to 20% of the grade of an overall grade. Somewhere between 15 to 20%, depending on, so I can go through and change the points based on what percentage it needs to be of that overall. For whatever this class came from, each of the SGQs was worth 8 points. And so, however, there 8 is, so sounds like maybe I had 24 of them. So, or whatever. But yeah, so at the end, and I generally let them drop their 2 or 3 lowest. With my students where I have 28 sessions, I probably let them drop 3 because then I can deal with just 25 in that. Because everybody has a bad day. Everybody, you know, doesn't get up when they're supposed to. Everybody has a day when they're not, don't want to talk in class, and I allow for that. Another hand is Marco. Did you have another question? Or Tatiana? Tatiana? Yeah.
Yeah, I have a question. I don't know if Marco is finished.
A minimum comment. You see the results of those quizzes of them?
Instantly, the minute they submit them.
Okay, okay. So you receive that information for doing changes during the course?
Yes, I do. I monitor, but I probably monitor, and about halfway through the course, I monitor very closely the first 2 or 3 so that I let students know that I'm watching. One of the great things about teaching online is that you can create the appearance of presence even if you're not really there. And this is kind of one of the ways of doing it. They don't know if I'm watching or not, but if in the first 3 units I go in and they hear from one another that I'm going in and talking to them, it helps a little bit with keeping them on the mark, I would note. That's probably, a little bit deceptive, but, we use what we can to do our jobs. Here, Tatiana?
Yeah, I have 2 questions. You mentioned that one of the issues with this is that they start participating a lot, and that in the end, that's a good thing for you. But I've had the experience, so I have two experiences. One is that when participation is accounted for, I have found myself in a classroom where there's a bit of a war for participating, and then if they don't have enough time to do so, they are really mad because this reflects on their grading. That's one thing. And the other one is in my evaluation this semester, I got a lot of comment that I would let them participate too much and they wanted to hear more from me. So how do you find that balance?
I have this question in there about dominating class discussions, and I will tell students when they're dominating a class discussion, either online or in the classroom. And that's the way that Tatiana, that I've just learned that it's easier for me to deal with it there. Then, I don't even do, student on student. I would have in the old days talked to them privately, but now what I try to do is in my classes, I point out that we need to have free and open communication with one another. And that means that they are free to give me any feedback that I need to hear, and I'm free to give them any feedback that they need to hear as well. And we all agree on that. And so I'll do a lot of examples of that, and I will, some days I will have, okay, today is a day when we're going to spend the first half of the class, and I only want to hear from people who I haven't been hearing from as much. And then I also think about how can I open up spaces to give more time when I need to, because exactly what you talked about can happen. That's one of the things, and it's something that you need to watch out for. But I have not had any large problem with that.
Thanks.
And it's very different, of course, in the classroom than it would be online. So again, that's the thing. Other questions, other comments on this? And as I said, I'm happy to share my rubrics. I'm happy to share my quizzes. You could actually go into, I think that IT could probably get you into my course that I taught for summer university, and you can grab my questions right out there so that you'd have the template to work with if you wanted to. All right, let's talk about a couple of other things if we have a chance here. I want to talk about peer review a little bit, because peer review is another one of those things that's been a really great revelation to me when I learned how to finally do it right. I used to think that peer review was simply having people, you kind of talk to each other about what they're doing. And what I learned is it's just like self-grading. The more structured it is, the more of a structured process it is, the better it works for them and for me. Peer review has made my grading so much easier. And students have really, I have been so surprised. This is one of the best things that I've ever done in my class, according to my class evaluations and the verbatim comments that I get. And especially my MBA students really like peer review because I really dedicate myself to it in here. So the important thing is sharing work in progress for feedback to be able to revise and improve their work. So if it spends me, I don't know about you, but it can take me, in my data visualization class, it can take me 20 minutes to grade a good assignment that comes in. It can take me 8 hours to grade a bad assignment. And so if I can push some of that feedback off, that formative types of feedback to students in the classroom and have them do it with one another, it really saves me time. So as I said, I want students to be able to receive and to act on that feedback. And so it takes a particular type of an assignment. Not all assignments are suitable for peer review, but the key success factors to me is that there's a structure, that the work is in progress, and that they use their feedback to be able to revise and improve their work prior to submission. So typically what I will do is in an online class, I'll have students submit a draft of their work. They then use that draft as a trigger for peer review. and then they turn in their final. And I look at both the draft and I look at the final to determine what's happened. So one of the key things here is that idea of a rubric, of a checklist, of a grading list. For me, it's the rubric that makes all the difference in the world in terms of peer review. And it took me a while to kind of get this right. Over on the left here, I have an example from my data visualization class, and I've come to realize there are two types of rubrics, or two types of rubrics. There's the ones that are instructor structured, which means I'm kind of focusing towards things that I'm going to be grading. So I want this to be something that is going to really kind of help me out as well in terms of it's so much easier to grade a good paper than a bad paper. So there's the unstructured part. And so these are all things, if you look at this here, this is my data visualization class. They have to do a data story in Tableau. And so these are things that I'm actually going to be grading them on. And so these are the things that I ask them to review in small groups with one another. And you can do this in the classroom, you can do it in break rooms, you can do it in threaded discussion. So that works. Then on the other side, there's the student structured. And typically I use student structured peer review a little bit later in the class. Those of you in OB know that, you know plus delta feedback. I learned this from my work at Microsoft, where we would always talk about what we liked about what we did on a project and what is something that could be changed or done differently. Not what's wrong, but what might you do differently? What might you think about doing differently? Because students like to avoid conflict just like everyone else, and they don't really want to say what's wrong. Although they'll say what's wrong online, they're not so likely to say it in the classroom. So the key thing here with peer review is using a rubric and using either that instructor structured or the student structured. And so again, I've been using rubrics now for over 10 years, use them in all my different classes. I use both the instructor structured and peer and student structured in my Uniandes class there. And here's the big learning that came out for me. Students care a lot more about what other students think of them than what I think about them. And at first I thought, wow, that's interesting. But it's really turned out to be true, because if students know that their work is going to be peer reviewed, they simply produce better work. I mean, I see that again and again. If I don't use peer review on assignments, or once I've started using peer review on assignments, I get much better work coming out. I get better work in their drafts, and I get better work in their final result, because they truly do care about what one another can do. Now, at Uniandes, I had a really interesting situation, is that I had a lot of undergraduate and I had a lot of graduate or professional students. So I had a real mix of levels of ability in terms of analytics. And what I found there is that the peer review was awesome, because there was a lot of mentoring that was going on from the older, more experienced students with the younger, less experienced students. It was important learning that they needed. I wouldn't have had the time to be able to provide that to them at such a targeted level, but others were able to do that for them in the peer review sessions that we had. As I said before, I think that peer review is really easy online. And students like it because they like interacting, they like engaging and getting to know one another. And as I said before, start with instructor structured. Once they kind of get the idea of it, then you can move to the less structured, kind of open it up a bit, and they'll understand what it is that they're supposed to be doing. And once again, peer reviews are another thing that are very positive in terms of my review. All right, what questions do you have about this? I mean, it's not a lot, and I use it for a lot of different types of assignments and stuff, but that's just kind of the big things that I've learned about peer review for reflection. And it works for reflection because it looks like they're reviewing someone else's work, but I know that peer review works when they say, that was a really good idea. I'm going to go back and I'm going to do that in my work. Or, you know what, you are having the same problem that I had, and I think that this is the right way to handle it. So as you're reviewing other people's work, you can't but help reflect on what you've been doing as well. Questions, comments?
Can you perhaps speak a bit about logistics and automation? So the other one seems that we have it very streamlined. This one.
All right. Well, the very best peer review system in the world is available on Moodle-based systems, and I checked to see whether or not Blackboard has it, and they don't. Moodle has something called workshops. And in there, I can randomly assign students in groups of 3s to review one another's works based on rubrics, assign one another grades, and then I can also impose an algorithm to grade them on how well they reviewed another student's work. That's pretty highly evolved. It's only can be done in Moodle. I could probably build it in another platform, but what I have to do here at my school, we use Brightspace, D2L, and what I have to do here is that I assign a draft of a draft has to come in for an assignment. The assignment comes in, they post that draft into a threaded discussion. I have created threaded discussions where there is a small peer review group, maybe just 3 students. 3 students seems to be ideal. And then those students are responsible for reviewing and providing feedback on everybody else's work in that discussion. And then based on the feedback that they get, at the end of the next unit that comes up, they have to submit their revised work. So that's a couple of different ways of doing it. You can do peer evals easily in the classroom as well. You have to give them the space to do it, and I think that's an important aspect of it, is they need the time and space to be able to do it. But what's really, really important is that the peer review means something. That it gives them an opportunity to enhance their grade if they act on the feedback that they receive. And again, they have to be, it has to be an assignment that peer evaluation makes sense for, and it requires that rubric once again. And as I said, you have to have a place for it. In the classroom, that can be a breakout group. If you're doing an asynchronous class, and I do lots of asynchronous, it works awesome in threaded discussions. If it's a synchronous class like I had with Uniandes Summer University, it can be breakout rooms. But again, with all of these, it's empowering the students to impact their grades through peer review. That makes it meaningful. It makes it worthwhile. It has to have some, incentive behind it. We all work to incentives. All right. Yes, please.
So when you get basically, for instance, you are grading, I don't know, maybe a final project. So the final grade that you use will be the ones that the colleagues or their classmates gave to the group, or you actually, like you previously said, you use this as an input, but the final grade, you are going to decide which is the final grade. I mean, in other words, the question is, the peer review, you use it as the final grade or as an input for you deciding the final grade?
That's a wonderful question, and it's one of the key things, and I didn't really have a lot of time to talk about it, but one of the elements that's necessary for experiential learning to take place, and what they call constructivism these days, is the fact that you don't grade everything. I don't grade the process of peer evaluation. I grade whether they do it or not, but I don't typically grade how well they do peer evaluation. I grade students on the output of their work. So if they have to submit their draft, otherwise they don't get any points at all for the assignment. And it has to be a full draft of something. They have to take part in the peer review discussion, whether it's in classroom or online. But then the student is graded for the outcome on their project. So yeah, there are parts of it that I don't grade, and I think that that's one of the things I'm really struggling with too, is learning what is it that I need to grade and what do I not need to grade.
Okay.
Because we have this idea that we have to grade everything. No, we don't. Some things just have to be done. And as I said, I'm still kind of thinking through how that actually works.
Okay, well, thanks.
But it's a great question, yeah. So, but no, peer review, as I said, when I work with my students in Finland and I can use Moodle, I can then grade them based on the effort and outcomes that they have in terms of evaluating other people's works. Because I have a system, I have a technology that'll allow me to do that. I don't have that too many other places, and I've been too lazy to build it. So if it's available, I'll use it, but otherwise, I just go forward. Yeah,
What
so
I
there are,
think, oh, sorry.
oh, please.
No, I was going to say that what I did last semester with a group of MBAs, so they had to present their final project, and it was like a conference. So each group were presenting to the other ones at the same time. And they have a rubrica, some criteria that I gave them previously, and they have to evaluate the presentation of the other groups on this rubric. And I say, so 50% of the grade is going to be your colleagues' assessment, and the other 50% is going to be mine.
Oh, now I think I understand the last question. The last question is, do I allow the students' feedback to be part of the grade?
Yeah.
Yes, and sometimes yes, sometimes no.
Okay.
But the students don't need to know, quite honestly. I mean, it's kind of like the peer grading, is that if I take them at their word for their peer grading on contribution to learning, their grades will be significantly lower than if I were just to grade them myself. And so I kind of think that's a good thing. So I will oftentimes let it stand, you know, unless there's a real outlier of some kind. But again, for me, I use review more for that process of helping students finish up that final work. And so what you were just saying reminded me of this plus delta feedback, is that, you know, what is it that you like? What is it that you would change? And many times we only do that when students do presentations of their final projects. I'm saying that for peer review, you should do this while students are still working on the project. That's what I try to do, so that it has something that they can actually apply it to, because I'm tired of writing up you know, feedback that students get from other students that they never, ever look at. They will never look at it if they do it for the final presentation. If they do it for an intermediate assignment that leads to that final presentation, then it's something they can use. Okay. Then it's something that they can directly apply.
All right.
Marco, did you have a question?
No, thank you.
Oh,
yes.
okay.
No,
great.
Thanks.
All right. Is there another hand up there? We have just like 5 minutes here. I just want to say about peer evaluation is that I struggled with this for years and years. I did it a number of different ways, and I found the answer. And the answer is something called Teammates. Does anybody use Teammates at your school? It is a third-party peer evaluation system created by the IT folks at the National University of Technology in Singapore. And those guys, I think, got it right. This is how I explain it on my syllabus. And so I do peer evaluations have an impact on individual team member grades in teams. And it's rather complicated, so I won't go into that there, but you can see it here. The main thing is, I was going to go through this little video, but you should go through this little video. And so it's called Teammates, and it is the best peer evaluation tool that I've ever seen. And here's what I like. They have standard peer review questions, and here's what they are. You estimate how much each team member contributed, including yourself. And it's a very nice system. And the guys in Singapore, being IT folks, they figured out how to write an algorithm to not make it possible for you to overinflate your own grade or to underinflate someone that you don't like on your team. And it works, because I have tried it out and tried to, skew the results on things, and they really made that happen and made it do well. So there's that good estimate there. And that first question is the question upon which I change people's grades. The second questions and through the fifth are questions that I think are good questions for the students from a developmental point of view. I think that they do, they reflect on what their contribution was, And that information is shown to everybody. That's the other thing I like about Teammates. It's a digital program, so you can use it in the classroom or online, and everybody sees everything. Now, some things are anonymous. There are some things only I see, but there are things that the students see that other students did that are important. So I think it's important that when people talk about their contribution, they know that other people on their team are going to see it. The third question is talking about specific teammates. I only need to see that. And then comments about team dynamics, I only need to see that. But what I really like, and what the students like, is the fifth question. They have to give each other feedback. How did they show up? How did you do? What did you do that was good? Were you not showing up to meetings? Did you let us down when the time was coming in? And I think that that's really, really important feedback for people to get. And they don't disagree with it. I mean, I never have anybody say, you know what, they're lying about this. This is not what happened. It seems to be a really, really good system. So what I would just say is that, you know, for this, I've used a lot of different peer evaluation tools. Students like it because they want team efforts to be fair. You know, there's the free rider problem there. And I think that they like to see how they're showing up to others. You know, it can be a high part. And I think that the main things for me is that to be fair, you have to do multiple peer evals. So just like before, students have to see their peer evaluations and then make a positive change. And I want to give them the opportunity to do that. So I always do at least 2 and usually 3 peer evals so that they can get and act on the feedback there. And I think the other thing is that peer evals should be both positive and negative. Slackers should receive fewer points than people who participated fully. And people who were super producers and who the team leaned on, they should get extra points. Now, I don't take points from anyone else. These are the only way to get extra credit in my class is by doing a super beyond average job in your team, and everybody on your team agrees that that exactly was the case. And if that's true, I will grant a certain number of points above that. But I don't take points away from anyone else to do that. And then the other important thing is that they apply the peer evals to each other. And so for this one here, I would just say the answer is that use teammates, and it solves a lot of problems. So a couple of minutes here. I know you have to go. I need to get on to my next call as well. Thank you so much for your time and attention. I do appreciate it. What question? And again, if there's anything that you saw that you want more about or would like to talk about or would like me to send resources, please let me know. But anybody got a couple of comments here at the end? That's where you can contact me, of course. And then big thank you to all of you. Go ahead and unmute if you have a question or a comment.
I just want to thank you. I found very useful all these insights and recommendations that you gave us. Really nice. Thank you.
Thank you, Paula. I appreciate your contribution and participation.
Thank you so much for your...
Thank you very much.
It was very practical, Dale, very down to earth, and I especially like those snapshots of what you've learned and your process along the way. So it's enlightening to share that process, and we'll hopefully learn from it.
Well, thank you very much. And if anybody should want all of the literature behind it, I have all of the resources and you know, citations, and I'm happy to share that as well.
Okay.
All right, I'm going to need to get on to another call now. So I'm going to say thank you very much. Have a great day. I hope to see you sometime in Colombia. I was disappointed not to be able to make it to Bogota this year. And now, of course, I see beautiful pictures of it and wish I were there. So hopefully. Thank you, Natalia, for all your help. Hey, Carolina.
Hi,
Good to have you
James.
with us.
Thank you very much for your presentation. I was late to your presentation, but I would like to thank you, and I think it was very useful to see other insights and other examples, and as Roberto mentioned, your personal experience on each of the different activities and rubrics and kind of surveys that you presented during your session. So thank you very much, and thank you for everyone that assisted to the presentation. And if you need more information, as Professor Fodness mentioned, you can do so directly through him, or if you need to other contacts, you can do it through Natalia or me. So
yeah, I'll go ahead and send my slides through. Should I send those to you or Natalia or both?
You can send it to both of us.
I will do that.
Okay, great.
All right, everyone. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye.
Everybody take care. Be safe. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye, Professor Fodness. Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Take care. Thank you.